Imagine waking up tomorrow to a headline that changes everything. Scientists have cracked aging, not immortality. Just this one specific thing. Your body stops breaking down. Your cells stop accumulating damage. Your organs don't slowly fail year by year. You don't get old, ever. For a moment, it sounds like pure victory. The greatest medical achievement in human history. No more watching your parents disappear piece by piece. No more decades of slow, quiet collapse. No more dying in a hospital bed of nothing in particular. But here's the thing. Solving aging doesn't end problems. It trades them. And the new problems it creates are so enormous, so deeply threaded into how civilization works, that curing aging might actually break the world before it gets a chance to improve it. So, what breaks first? Before we can answer that, let's understand what aging actually is. Because most people think about it wrong. Your body is not a machine wearing down from use. It's something stranger than that. With it, every single cell in your body carries a full set of instructions, your DNA. And every time a cell divides, those instructions get copied. Billions of times, every single day. Yet every copy introduces tiny errors. Over years and decades, these stack up and start to matter. Proteins misfold, cellular machinery breaks down, cells stop dividing correctly, and when they divide wrong, that's cancer. Your immune system, once a sharp and relentless defense network, becomes slow and confused. It starts attacking the wrong things. There's also a biological clock buried inside every cell. At the tip of each chromosome sit telomeres. Every time a cell divides, those caps shorten slightly. When they get too short, the cell can no longer divide and enters what scientists call senescence. It doesn't die cleanly. It just sits there, leaking toxic, inflammatory signals that damage everything around it. These zombie cells accumulate over years. And that slow, steady, toxic buildup is one of the primary engines of everything we experience as getting old. And that slow, steady, toxic buildup is one of the primary engines of everything we experience as getting old. It is a cascade of dozens of overlapping failures, each accelerating the others. That's all threading together into what we eventually call old age. Which is exactly what makes it so hard to attack. But here's what's genuinely exciting. A class of drugs called senolytics have already reversed biological aging markers in mice. Gene therapies currently in clinical trials. Serious capital is now pouring into longevity research. The scientific consensus is shifting, quietly, then quickly. From aging is inevitable to aging is a solvable problem. The question is no longer really whether we can intervene. The question is, what happens to everything else when we do? Right now, Earth holds around 8 billion people. And the uncomfortable truth is that the only reason that number is even remotely manageable is death. Roughly 55 million people die every year. The vast majority from aging-related causes. The slow collapse of a body that was never built to last much past 80. Now remove that. Remove aging deaths entirely. That's 50 million people per year who simply don't die. Birth rates haven't changed. Population doesn't just grow faster. It grows with no ceiling, No correction, nothing pulling it back. Within a few generations, the planet would be trying to support 15, 20, perhaps 30 billion people. Resources already dangerously stretched. Get pushed past every breaking point we currently understand. There is also a subtler problem underneath this one. Our entire concept of old age, retirement, stepping back, making space for what comes next, only exists because bodies eventually decline and demand it. In a world where bodies don't decline, that rhythm disappears. No one steps back. There is no generational flow. Just an endless present populated by everyone who has ever lived past childhood, all competing for the same resources, the same positions, the same space. And here's the brutal irony at the center of all this. A planet built over 4 billion years to support life would be overwhelmed by too much of it. Not because humans are greedy or thoughtless, just because they refuse to die. The cure becomes the catastrophe. Let's say something uncomfortable out loud. A cure for aging would not arrive simultaneously at every clinic on Earth. It would appear first in a lab, then a clinical trial, then a patent, then a price tag. The first people to stop aging would be wealthy, almost certainly, then slightly less wealthy, and eventually maybe everyone else. If the political will existed, if global supply chains existed, if the patent holders decided the world mattered more than their revenue model. But think about what a world actually looks like where powerful people simply do not die. Where billionaires and executives and politicians hold their positions not for decades, but for centuries. Where generational transfer of power doesn't happen because the older generation never leaves. Where a 400-year-old ruling class isn't a colorful metaphor. It is literally a description of who is in office and who owns everything. Every system we have built assumes turnover. Democracies are built on the expectation that new voters with new values eventually replace old ones. Economies assume wealth eventually redistributes through inheritance. Science depends on the idea that old paradigms get buried with the scientists who defended them, and new generations build something better. What happens to all of that when none of it is true anymore? Here's something harder to quantify and harder to argue against. Much of what gives human life its weight, its urgency, its texture, its meaning, comes directly from the fact that it ends. You call the people you love because you know, somewhere underneath everything, so that someday you won't be able to. You take the trip because you're aware that your body and your time are not unlimited. You make the thing, say the hard thing, stay up too late chasing an idea, because there is a deadline, even if you don't look at it directly. Death is terrible. It is genuinely, objectively awful. It robs people of years they deserved. It destroys families. It is not a gift. But it has also been the engine behind almost everything humans have ever created, loved, or considered worth doing. What happens to that engine in a world with no deadline? What happens to art created by someone who has nothing urgent to express and centuries left to procrastinate? What happens to love when nothing has to matter right now? What happens to the thing you do because you won't always be here to see how it turns out? We don't know. Nobody does. But the honest answer is, a huge amount of what makes you human is structurally load-bearing. And removing aging means removing the wall that most of it is built against. Here's where the argument flips completely. Because aging is not wise. It is not a natural order deserving reverence. It is not a feature. Aging is a disease. It is cells failing, tissues collapsing, minds slowly going dark, people disappearing piece by piece long before they are actually gone. The suffering packed into a typical old age is enormous and largely invisible. The loss of memory, of your own name, of your grandchildren's faces, the loss of autonomy, the slow erosion of the person you spent a lifetime becoming. These are not small inconveniences. They are catastrophic things that happen to nearly every single person who lives long enough, quietly, behind closed doors, away from the parts of life we photograph and celebrate. And we have never truly fought it. We spend trillions every year managing the symptoms, treating the cancers, the strokes, the failing kidneys, the dementia, while almost nothing goes toward attacking the mechanism underneath. Imagine redirecting even a fraction of that toward actually solving the root problem. Not extra years in slow decline, extra decades of full cognitive function, full physical capacity, full life. That alone, even without immortality, would be the single most transformative development in human history. Honestly, everything, a little bit. Pension systems designed around people retiring and dying within 20 years. Housing markets, political structures, food systems. The deeply personal sense of meaning that comes from being a creature with a finite lifespan. But things that break can be rebuilt. The problem has never been human capacity for change. The problem is who decides how change happens, and in whose interest. A cure for aging, deployed recklessly, could lock in the current distribution of power for centuries. Deployed thoughtfully, with genuine global access, it could become the most equalizing technology in history. Civilization has survived shocks that seemed world-ending before. The printing press, germ theory, industrialization, the nuclear age, and emerged changed, unequal, often frightening, but intact. And we are more adaptable than we give ourselves credit for. The real danger is not curing aging. The real danger is curing it carelessly, letting it become one more technology that concentrates power instead of distributing it. That ends suffering for some while abandoning everyone else. That arrives before humanity has had the honest, difficult conversation about what kind of world it actually wants to live forever in. Because the question was never really, can we cure aging? We probably can. The harder question, the one nobody wants to sit with, is, what kind of civilization deserves to be immortal? That one is still very much open.